Welcome everybody to another episode of Bootstrap Solo. I am your host Pratik Shah, and today we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly about running your own practice. This podcast is for those that want to know what it's really like to start, run, and grow a practice. Today's guest is Dan Morgan. He helps run Morgan & Morgan, which is the largest personal injury firm in the entire United States. Over 600 lawyers, and they focus on personal injury, starting out in Orlando, Florida. For those of you that don't know Morgan & Morgan, I'm sure you've seen their billboards and their advertisements everywhere. They are across the country, and we're lucky to have Dan with us today to talk to us about how to grow and scale that practice. Dan, thank you for agreeing to be on the show.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah. So obviously you're part of the Morgan family. You've seen the practice grow since when you were obviously a young kid. You've seen your dad run it. When did you start and join the practice?
So I've been practicing now about 8 years. I started actually getting around the practice, though, probably when I was 16 years old. My dad actually has some attraction companies here in Orlando as well. So when I actually first started working for my family was when I was 14, 15 down at Wonderworks, one of his attractions he has. Then it was the summer of 16, 17. I left there and I started working in the call center at Morgan & Morgan. So I've actually been in the call center since I was about 17 years old. I've worked every job there. I was in the call center. I was an investigator, where you go out and sign the cases up back in the old days. Now we have DocuSign and things like that. But back when I was 18, 19, I would drive out to clients' homes, give them the spiel of the contracts, go through everything, get them signed up. When I was in law school, I was, interning, doing paralegal work, case manager work, organizing, doing all that grunt work. And then, about 8 years ago, I went to Stetson Law School, was an intern at our St. Pete office over there during that time. So I've pretty much been around the business for, 15 years, and actual lawyer for about 8 of those.
No, I love that. So you've been working since you were 14 and 15. I think probably a big misconception people have is, he's John Morgan's son. They roll out the red carpet. He just walked in, but doesn't sound like that was the case for you.
Oh, no. Yeah. In our household, if you didn't have a job, you didn't have a social life. That was kind of
I like that.
One of the trade-offs we had. Even there's times where I was like, I'm not working for you anymore. I worked for Boston Market. I worked for Firehouse Subs. When I was in college, I had jobs. So, we were Morgan's learn to work.
I love that. Yeah, I think that's super. I think that's really important because if you haven't seen what it's like outside with people, working in jobs outside of the family business, like you mentioned, Boston Market, things like that, I've seen kids, we've had people that work at my old firm that have only worked in family businesses. It's just different. And when you've seen kids that work somewhere else, it's just different. They understand what it's like.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you get a good taste of just the world and who, that Boston Market, people that were my same job when I was, 16, 17-year-old kid during the summer, they're 45-year-old, that's their career and that's what they're doing. And you just get an appreciation for that kind of person. And when you have a client later in life, you can relate back and know exactly the different struggles different people are going through.
No, that's exactly right. Being able to relate to people from different walks of life is so important in this business, not only because they go through injuries, but what it really means to them. And if you can't relate to somebody who works a different job than you, that's a problem. How are you going to connect with them? How are you going to explain to them that, hey, I know what that job's like. I know how physically grueling it can be, or I know how mentally grueling it can be. I've been there and I understand, or I have family members that work there. And that helps build that connection.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. You have, we get clients and, when you're literally on your feet 9-10 hours a day, and you're also got a herniation in your L5-S1, and that's just compressing it the whole time. But you have to it's like, I have to work. I have to provide. It just makes it that much worse when you're going through it. But yeah, there's all sorts of things. Like my dad was good at exposing us, to all walks. When I was growing up, I played for Sanford Pop Warner, which is primarily an all-black football team. And the way we were kind of zoned up, I could have played for Lake Mary, which was predominantly white. He's like, no, you're going to Sanford. You're going to really see what's going on in the world. And I feel like that's been one of my biggest things too. Is just I'm able to talk to the president of the United States. I'm able to talk to Deontay, who worked at Boston Market with me, and there's really no overlap between those conversations. Because at the end of the day, it's a person's a person.
And that's exactly right. You realize like we're just not that different. Like we're all kind of the same. We all want the same thing. We all want to take care of our families. We all care about our kids, and that's about it.
Exactly. Yeah. It's really, it's been a great experience to kind of see all walks of life and experience it.
I love that. So, one of the purposes of this podcast is to talk to those young lawyers that are out there that are starting their practice, that are trying to grow their practice. And there's really kind of, I think, two steps in a practice. One is just starting it, getting your first clients and going from there. And obviously, you weren't obviously part of that. But the second part, I think, is really relevant to you, which is after you hit a certain kind of inflection point, helping scale it to that next level, right? And having been around since you were 14 or 15 in the business, you've seen that. You've seen the business go from, obviously it was already a decent size, a good size, but you've seen it expand and grow. And there's growing pains that come with that. Is there anything that you particularly remember that was like a big sticking point in that scaling process?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's always really finding who is your operator going to be in those newer markets. It started off, Morgan, it actually started as another firm called Morgan, Conn and Gilbert that then morphed into Morgan & Morgan when the two former partners said, we don't want to scale anymore. My dad already went to Orlando, then he went to Tampa, then he was in Jacksonville. Then he's like, I'm going to Atlanta now. And they were kind of like, we're leaving Florida. We're going to keep expanding. We don't really want, where's this going to keep going? We're not stopping in Atlanta, then we're going to the Northeast, and we're going to go out west, and we're going to go to the Northwest. We're going to kind of keep this. And they're like, no mas, tapped out. They were like, we don't want to keep putting our dividends and our profits back into the expansion process. So one, you got to get the buy-in from the partners and the groups to really make that investment of, we're going to, my dad's, one of his famous slogans is, it's from a book, is grow or die. If you're not growing, then the business is dying or you're getting complacent. So always kind of planning that next step. So one, you got to get the buy-in from the partnership group. You got to get the buy-in from people that believe in the mission that we're going to go and kind of put a flag in a new territory and expand out or get involved in a new practice area. When these different cases or mass torts or different things pop up, you're going to be bold and say, yeah, we're going to go and try these certain types of cases. But then once you make that commitment and you get the buy-in, the most difficult part is getting the operators in place that can actually kind of replicate the systems you have that have made, Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, Atlanta successful when you go to a new market like DC or Boston or Philly, where you really expand, or, LA, when you're going across the country and you don't have the oversight and you're on a time difference to really make sure things are running the way they are, to have someone that you really trust that's going to kind of do it, the Morgan way, so to speak, or the way the company is supposed to operate. My dad will always also compare it to, a McDonald's or a fast food restaurant, where if you go to a McDonald's, you're getting that same cheeseburger, whether you're in the airport in Atlanta or whether you're, at a stop somewhere in Hong Kong. If you see McDonald's, you're going to get that quality. And that's kind of the way you want it with Morgan & Morgan. And, the truth is, in some of these markets, when we first started going, we had the wrong operators in there. They weren't doing the things the way we were doing. My dad's like, you're going into a McDonald's and they're serving hot dogs and tacos, and you're like, what the hell's going on in here? That's not how we do it.
Yeah.
What do you mean we're not getting them to a orthopedic, immediately? You're waiting until 8 months down the road. Why? And they say, well, because we have a theory. That's like, we don't care about your theory. The way we do it is we get them in immediately and let the doctor drive the care, not the lawyer.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, if you want our support, if you want to be under our banner, if you want our resources, you got to do it our way. Yeah. And that's just the way it goes.
Exactly. We have a kind of a playbook. We know this works. We know these systems and operations work. And you get a lot of pushback sometimes, especially because we'll go into new markets and we'll get, a superstar attorney who's, fantastic in their own right, and they're very successful, but that's their system, that's their ways. And they're like, listen, especially, it's not so much anymore, but I remember when I was first starting 8-9 years ago, during that process of determining to go paperless, and, you're telling lawyers that have been doing it for 35 years, you're not getting the files anymore. We're not doing the hard copies with the police reports and the coverages all in a file and a filing system. It's all going to be on, your computer. And they're kind of looking at you with a blank stare, like, what do you mean? I don't use computers. I don't have a computer in my office. I don't, but you kind of, when you have the skill you have, and then my employees like, listen, we can't make an exception for these 5 attorneys to say, it's like, hey, if you want to do both, you want to figure out a way to do it, to accomplish it, but we need to have oversight to be able to look into your file and see what coverages there are available. If we have the capability to go in and have it, lined up in a software where we can have the oversight of a case, you have to do it. We understand it's not your personal preference because it may add more work to you. You might be out of your comfort zone temporarily. But once you actually buy into it, you're going to see that the results are that much better, and it's actually going to make your job easier, not harder. But, it's change in general. I keep going back to sayings that, my family and stuff says, but, my dad will always say when you tell someone just the word change, you can say, hey, come to my office, I'm changing your parking spot. They'll come in and say, what the hell you are? I'm not leaving my parking spot. I've been in that parking spot for 4 years. And you say, no, I'm changing to put you closer to the office door. They're like, oh, okay, let's go ahead and change it then. When they hear that word change, just initially they hear change, and they're like, absolutely not. I'm not changing anything. And then you're like, well, no, we're going to change it. You're going to make more money. You're going to be able to do this. You're going to be able to do that. You're going to have more free time. You're going to be able to actually litigate cases and not worry about medical reductions. Let someone else do that for you. And you're like, oh yeah, I actually do. I do want that change. So it's really kind of getting, having all those different buy-ins and letting people see, no, this is actually a better way to do things. And really what it is, once other lawyers start doing it, and they're able to say, hey, this software isn't that bad, or this system actually is helping me a lot. And like, oh, well, let me try it, and it works. And you get the homeostasis going.
Yeah, and that's, it's riskier and tougher the bigger you get, right? If you're a 3-person practice or a 5-person practice, it's hard enough to get lawyers or your staff to buy into new systems. But when you're running a 6,000 person practice like you guys have, being able to go across the country, office to office, and say, this is how we do it, and that comes back down to those operators, right? Is that, hey, if Mothership can send a message to the operators, and those operators are going to follow that outline, exactly, then you're confident that it's going to be done the way it needs to be done.
1,000%, exactly. And it's definitely a lot easier to move we'll pilot these programs too. So if we have an idea that this process might be better, we're not just going to roll it out firm wide. Hey, here's our new system we think might work best. Everyone do it now, because obviously you'll be in a constant state of chaos with everyone's just always complaining. So we'll say, hey, here's a system we think is going to work. So let's take 100 cases, pilot this program out with 10 or 3 attorneys, do it, kind of tinker it, work on it for a few months, get it, and then say, now we know it works. Now let's roll it out to our Orlando office first. Let them spread the good news. Now we're going to go to Tampa. So we're able to do slower rollouts, and then with the idea of, as the more people buy into it, then all of a sudden, instead of saying, I don't want it to come here, Kentucky office is like, I can't wait till it gets here.
Yeah. We've been hearing that our friends in the Orlando office telling us how awesome it is.
We can press a button now, and we don't, instead of having to do the responses, we can now just have it all right there, and it'll drop down for us. We don't have to go hand by hand and see it all. Oh, thank God, this is finally here. We'll pilot the program and then go out, and then it's easier too once you have that actual concept, the proof down, and then when you have the people within saying this isn't going to work, you're like, well, then explain to me why Philadelphia just doubled their productivity and their fees for the month of May, and they're the only office in the firm that's on that system. It kind of just quiets the haters. And
you've got the numbers to back it up, because everything's into that software, and it's so easy to run those reports.
It's data driven, exactly. It gives you oversight. You can see what's where. Takes away SOL issues and all those headaches that go along with things sent through the cracks and people doing their own way, their own systems, not inputting information. Then it's just getting the buy-in from the people. You have to input this information. If we have the systems, you don't put. You're only as good as your data is. If you're not inputting the data, then we're still driving the ship blind. And the goal is to be able to see all the icebergs out there and what we got going on.
And that's such a great analogy, because I think that's a mistake the small and medium firms make. And I know I made it when I was at my small medium firm, is that you don't know the data and the data that you're looking at for your firm, your finance numbers, your top line revenue, your costs, and all that stuff, knowing all that stuff on a month-to-month basis, where we should be going. That's your map.
Oh, exactly.
That's your North Star. And if you don't know where that is, and you're just kind of like, we'll figure it out month to month, it's going to limit what you can do.
On every aspect, on marketing dollars, on case intakes coming in, on your turn down cases, on active litigation. Is this case settled? Is it closed? Is is the BI portion settled, but the UM still open? Was that documented correctly? Because if you don't know what's out, like you're literally driving blind, and you can't forecast out future or future plans if you don't really know what are. Sometimes it's a good surprise though, because it's like, oh, I didn't know about this, and oh, I just got a huge check just showed up.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, it is good, but it's also bad. You should have known that check was en route.
Yeah, it's great when the surprises are positive. It's not great when the surprises are negative.
This lawsuit because I missed a statute. What's going on? Yeah, exactly.
Well, I bet it's and I know this was true for me, was that even when it was a positive surprise, I'd get anxiety because I'm like, why was this a surprise? Because that means that there's probably something out there I'm missing that I should know.
1,000%. Yeah. And more recently too, I've got more hands-on with our referrals, our nationwide referrals and things like that. And even we refer out cases that, PI case that we might not like in Florida, we'll still refer it out. And every time I get it, it's like, hey, good news. This case we turned down, we just got a great referral fee on it. It's always people are like,
what did we miss?
What do you mean we got to turn this down? What the hell is going on down there? I'm like, no,
who turned it down?
We're going to turn it down and lose money, but instead of turning it down, I found a partner to take it. We made money, so it's constantly, even when it's good, it's bad. But that's just the beast.
Yeah, because I think the pursuit is perfection, which you can never achieve, but that's what you try to achieve every day. And if you miss something, you want to know why. Exactly. Is that a hole? Is that something we can plug? Is that a leak in our game that we can, fix type of thing?
Exactly.
So a couple of questions that I think business owners struggle with, and you've touched on them, and I want to deep dive a little bit, is like on hiring. You talked about, hey, when we go into a new market, we find an operator for that market. Generally speaking, are you guys taking an existing firm and saying, hey, you guys are already pretty decent operators. We want to roll you into our Morgan umbrella and we'll give you the resources, blah, blah, blah. Or are you just putting out an ad, trying to hire somebody? Or is it just market dependent?
It's really a hodgepodge of all three, and then additional two of recruiting from within, which has been kind of a new model too, of taking one of our better producers, one of our existing markets that may not be a partner level, but is because the partnerships are different. We kind of have a basic kind of set number of partners for each office. So if an office like Orlando, which is well established, and you're in there and you're thriving superstar, you might realize my path to partner might be 4 or 5 years to get there. If I take a leap of faith and I go and be one of the first attorneys in the LA office, or I'll be one of the first attorneys in the St. Louis office, not only will I be a partner, I'll be a partner at a major, the major chunk in the game. And I'll be first boots on the ground. I'll be able to see the cases as they come in first and be a real leader of that office. That's kind of something we've transitioned to, I'd say, more in the past 8-9 months, just because of, and you're getting people that know our playbook, the way we do things. So you're getting that manager that from day one is going to turn that culture into what we know and expect, instead of, and don't get me wrong, we've gone out there and we've merged with some really, really fantastic firms and markets. And they've been, in St. Louis, I know we have, it's been great. In Indiana, we have, and it's been phenomenal. So we get some, so it does work that way too, especially if you see if it's a firm, 3 or 4 attorneys where it just makes sense, where you can bring it on. You have the caseloads that are coming in. Obviously, if it's a larger firm with 20, 25 attorneys, it just makes, it's just a lot harder to merge and act and acquire and things like that. But no, there's been plenty of times where we've had, even attorneys that do, criminal and all this, like, you're just a phenomenal attorney. You do PI. Why don't you we're going to launch here. Why don't you come be one of our first attorneys? You'll be on the ground floor. You'll get the good looks of cases and things like that. And then now what we're seeing is, now that we've kind of launched that program, as we're going into newer markets, some of our attorneys from within are saying, hey, if you guys ever go to, Portland, Oregon, think of me.
Let
if
me
you
know.
guys ever go here, I have family in Cincinnati. I'd love to get there. So it's definitely a recruiting from within. But then, then obviously as the cases start coming in and the inventory starts piling up, then we have recruiters and people out there that go out and then try to find good associates to build on. And then, a lot of the times kind of Morgan & Morgan, it's really strictly a meritocracy. We have leaderboards. You see where you are comparatively to everyone else in the firm. You see case counts. You see, we don't want people to wonder, why is this person getting an opportunity to go to St. Louis and I'm not. It's like, well, he led the firm in fees. He was top 10 for 18 months straight, and you were in, you're top 25. He's now there, but you keep working, you see it, and they can complain about case types and things like that. And you're like, well, here's all his cases. Here's what he did with these facts. Here's what he did with that. So it kind of takes that away of it too. And then it really just helps kind of grow as we keep going to kind of keep building the army, as we call it.
Yeah, that's an interesting point you talk about with transparency, right?
Yeah.
Excuse me. Not only is it, I mean, for me, I'm just competitive as a person. So I want to know where I stand and I want to know what I could do to be number one, because I'm just competitive. And I think a lot of attorneys are that way. They've got that competition driven that drives them, right? And in a friendly way, you want a friendly competition within the firm, right? But the fact that you guys have that transparency, is that something relatively new? You guys always been that way?
I would say,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say it's probably new within the past 5-6 years. It definitely wasn't really it was kind of just starting. My dad was the one that was like, let's get leaderboards involved, because he knew how other sales companies kind of did it to drive the competition from within. Kind of the same things you're saying is lawyers in general are just competitive people. You want to know class rank. You want to know, where am I on the curve? Where am I? What am I? A lot of people are former sales type jobs, that come to the guys side. There's all that type. They're entrepreneurs. They own businesses. They own bars. They're hustlers. They're grinding. They're generating cases. So you get that mentality, and you kind of mix it with the leaderboard. But no, it really was like a, I don't know if it's X-rated or R-rated, but it was a holy shit type moment where
this is HBO. You can say anything.
Where we introduced the leaderboards, because in a year, if someone hit 4 million in fees, it was like, holy, this guy just hit 4 million in fees. It's never been done back when we first started it. Now, like the goal, like almost, that's like the standard is 4 million in fees. We have, someone last year hit like 15 in fees, where it's like, what the hell is, that was impossible. But all of a sudden the leaderboard, year after year, people are now competing with each other. They're trying to get it. They're trying to, it's gamification of the system a little bit, and it's competitive. The higher you're up on that board, well, the more money you're making. So it's a good board to be on, and you're getting recognition. We incentivized it now where you get a goal at the beginning of the year. We look at your inventory. We're able to look at the coverages you have, the case facts you have, and we say, with this inventory, you should hit this goal, and you get your goal number at the end of the year, and you're able to track that throughout the year. Competitive to everyone else, you can see, or my goal is $1 million, their goal is 3.5 million. They're at 3 million, but I'm at 2 million. So technically, I'm double what I should be doing, and you're going to get the recognition. And then we have a thing where if you beat your goal by 20%, this year you're going to the Cayman Islands. So then you just gamify it that way, and you get the buy-in, and then you get the celebration with everybody that made goal. They're now together, they're celebrating, and then we reveal on that trip the trip next year, if you hit goal, is going to be to here, and then the kind of
Well, and it just makes sense from so many levels, right? Not only from the leadership level to know how people are doing and have some insight into understanding where people should be, and investing that time in the beginning of reviewing stuff to make sure that you're fairly assessing where they should be based on their cases. Not only is that great from a leadership and a business perspective, not only is it great from the competition perspective that people are driving and pushing themselves, but it's great from the employee perspective, right? If I'm an employee, I want to know where I stand. I want to know what I have to do to be able to hit a bonus. If I know that if I do X, I get Y, well, then I'm going to do everything I can to hit X, because I know what that means for me, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes when it's like kind of just open and out there, it's hard for people to be self-driven that way, because they don't have a target. If you don't give people a target, they don't know. And as an employee, if I know if I'm an employee, I know for a fact, if I do X, Y, Z, I get A, B, C, that becomes really easy for me.
Exactly. And we try to make it like, here's the steps to do it. Here's the way to work the case. Here's we kind of, and even now we're trying to really give them the power to kind of figure out what their goal should be. So we have a program where, you have your case and you go in and you estimate what you think the fee will eventually turn out to be. And now you're competing against yourself. Now it's like, well, 5 months ago, I said this was going to be a tender. So I put in 40,000. Here I am 4 months later, and they're at 80,000 offer. And I kind of want to take it. And the case isn't what I thought it was going to be. And you're able to, I said 4 months. So it's like, you can settle it where you want to settle it, but just know now you're competing against yourself. You gave yourself that target in the end game. You believed in that this case, that at that one point, that's what it is for whatever. And obviously,
and I think that happens in cases, right? Like,
I was going to say, sometimes cases is all. It's like, what do you mean
Yeah.
I didn't tell you they were involved in 3 prior accidents. And,
Right. Or they get into a future accident where you're like, I couldn't control that.
I mean, I've had it in the client. Oh, I didn't know that was important. You didn't know it was important. You got the semi truck hit you 3 days before my accident. You got in a bus accident 5 days after my accident, but those injuries aren't related. It's all from this one accident. So obviously, we know those happen. We have a whole thing, a whole committee where it's like you got to bail on the case, and we're trying to do a better job now on our end of just pre-checking all that stuff, running reports, and their information, because at the end of the day, even on the intake side, I kind of learned when I was doing the case intakes back when I was 16, 17, you're really dependent on the client being 100% truthful with you on the facts they're giving you when you sign the case up. It's like, oh my God, this car was hit by a semi truck. They were going straight. Of course, we're signing it up, and all of a sudden the police report comes in, and our client ran a red light and was hit by an ambulance that was going.
And with DUI.
With DUI, and it's like, wait, but this was a good case 3 days ago. But yeah, that's the case. Wasn't the actual case.
Yeah,
it is. You got to clean it up. So you're obviously dependent there, and different things happen, subsequents that they hide, or prior accidents they hide, or the fraud unfortunately is out there. But we do our best just getting that stuff cleared out and out of the system, because all it is gunk that's going to bog down your machine of running things smoothly, and so that's pre-qualifying all that stuff is definitely a big.
Yeah, and I think being on the outside of a large firm, being small and medium, there is this belief, and we all know in our heart it's not true, but there's this belief that, hey, money solves all problems. And if I was as big as Morgan & Morgan and I had the war chest that they had, I would be running as smooth as they are as well. And I think the reality is what it does is it causes different problems, or sometimes the problems are bigger problems, because if I make a decision in a 7-person firm and it's a mistake, it affects 7 people. If you make a decision in a 5,000, 6,000 person firm and it's a mistake, it affects 6,000 people.
Exactly.
Obviously it's like, hey, yes, things are good financially, all that stuff is good. But what I want people to know is some of the tough decisions that happen at that level.
Yeah. So definitely when you're looking at newer markets, those are always kind of the big, I got a list here of different markets that we're looking at now and kind of weighing those pros and cons of you're going to make, especially back in the day when we would kind of launch. Now we do it a lot smarter the way we launch, for instance. It's probably a good example. When we launched, DC back in the day, it was like, hey, we're going to do marketing. We're going to go hire a bunch of lawyers. We're going to go get a bunch of office space. Or Atlanta's even a better example. We're going to get 3, floors of office space. We're going to get all these lawyers. We're going to pay all this marketing dollars, and you kind of hope cases come in. We're going to spend just as much as Orlando is spending, but it's a baby company, and it's not where it's supposed to be. And all of a sudden, you're in 8 figures of debt after 3 years, and cases aren't what you thought they were. The values aren't the same as they are in Florida, and the lawyers aren't moving the cases, and they're not as hungry, and you got the wrong managing partner kind of making the shots, and you got firm happy hours starting every day at 3 p.m. and everything's kind of haywire. Where now when we go into markets, we do it a lot more, we kind of concentrate and we kind of get the marketing out. We'll kind of slow drip in, get some marketing out first, test the reception are people going to call us? Are they going to get those cases in? As those cases initially are coming in, we might not even take that many. We might refer them out to great lawyers that are in the area that we know can work the cases. We can build referral fees up that way, kind of start building the war chest, getting more money in that way, establishing relationships and partnerships with firms that are in the field, that know the area, that know the landscape, and can advise us. In New York, for instance, labor law cases are huge. Sidewalk premises cases are huge, where those same cases might not be great in Florida or Texas. Work comp in Texas, for instance, is somewhat non-existent. Obviously, there's exceptions to every rule, but as far as comparatively speaking to a market like Florida, or where it was already zapped, or a market like New York where it's great, you kind of learn those things instead of just launching in and being like, I'm going to be a work comp firm in Texas. Like, wait a minute, no, you're not. So really, so kind of scaling that out was definitely one of the learning curves, where we go in, let's just test the water, and then we know we get in 30 cases a month or whatever it is. Now let's put one lawyer in, build it smartly, not just let's make a bang. Let's get in there. And now we've seen you're able to grow faster doing it that way too, because you're not constantly trying to keep up. It's like you're more in a luxury position where you need a lawyer instead of you have to get, one, you don't want to have too many lawyers you're paying, they're not working at all, because now that's not what we're in it for. And you also don't want to have to need I got it. If I don't have it, we're going to suffer either, because then that's how it is. Even in Orlando right now, we definitely have a shortage. I know you said 600 lawyers. We're actually over 800 now, and we still have a shortage.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're all good. And we have a shortage in some of these offices, which is wild, just because it's obviously a good problem to have. But all of a sudden, it's like, well, if we don't get this addressed in the next 2 months, it's going to be a really bad problem, because then you're not going to have the lawyers to service cases. We did a whole new program this year, an internship program, where we're going out and recruiting directly from law schools, where a lot of these bigger white collar law firms have really kind of built their armies that way, of going there, offering high paying jobs to top 10% of classes. Yeah. And it's kind of hard to build that same scale with personal injury firms, because one, what are they going to be doing during the summer? Or are there going to be enough work for them? With my internships, my buddies were watching Netflix and occasionally writing writing discovery responses. We weren't getting that practical real world experience. We kind of built out a program where we're going to actually, have almost like a college type of source, where here's what you do to discovery. Here's how you get a life care plan. Here's what you're looking for on MRI. Here, really teaching them, and then hopefully start hiring from colleges and building out that way. And you're getting qualified people, and they're learning it the Morgan way from day one, instead of learning it, other third, back in the day, my dad's philosophy was never hire out of law school. We don't want to be the ones that are training them. Let them go get trained by insurance defense type firm. Let them go be work for the state prosecutor, public defender, get trial experience, then work insurance defense, then come to Morgan & Morgan after they've been seasoned for 7-8 years. The problem with that was that they would come in with the insurance kind of blinders on, and they were looking at every case. There's no property damage. That case isn't worth anything. That's only a herniation. That's not worth anything. Where it's like, no. You've been drinking the State Farm Kool-Aid for too long. Yeah. These cases are actually just as valuable, or if not more valuable than any, because those, even though you might not think it's a real injury, because that's what the insurance companies taught you, that herniation is poking into his spine and sending electric shocks down to his legs that he's dealing with, 18 hours a day, 24 if he's got it while he sleeps too. It's like, no, that's actually a very valuable case. So kind of reteaching the insurance, we're like, why are we going through this process? And today, sometimes you have people that have just been there for so long, you're never going to change their thinking. You're never going to they're never going to believe that, a herniation. I had a verdict recently. It was chiropractic only. We got 1.8 million on a 2-level herniation just because the jury saw what it was. It's like, yeah, he's a 40-year-old man that hasn't had surgery now. The doctor says he needs it. He's going to need it eventually. Yeah. He had a great life before, and now it's happened now. But no matter what you do to some insurance defense attorneys, if it's chiro only and 50,000 in bills, that case is never more than 6 figures. But when you get a law student in there to work that case with you, see the verdict come out, then all he knows is that case is worth, it's like, no, listen, that every herniation case isn't worth $1.8 million, but they get in this pattern, at least that's their norm instead of the opposite being the norm.
And it's easier to take somebody who's a 10 on aggressiveness and dial them down versus somebody who's a 0 and try to get them revved up, right? It's much easier. And to your point, I have friends that have worked, insurance defense for 10, 15 years, and there's just no talking to them. They just think everything's fraud. Like, that's not reality. Like,
Morgan & Morgan system, you get them to your doctors, you do this and that, you're in cahoots with the hospital, you got your own CT screens in there that are, these MRIs aren't really MRIs. The doctors work differently, the reading radiologist is on it, the surgeon's in on it. It's all just a big conspiracy.
It's always a big conspiracy. That's exactly right. One of the things you talked about earlier in going into new markets that I want to touch on is that now that you guys have adjusted your strategy, it seems to be there's a lot more patience, because you talked about going into a market, getting cases, referring them out. That also helps you see kind of what the true value of cases in that market is, because you can do as much theory and running reports and data as you want, but until your boot's on the ground, you don't actually know. And a good way to see, like, hey, I don't want to over invest into a market, and especially from a human capital perspective, right? If you've got an attorney that's been in Florida for 10 years and they say, hey, I'm gonna bet on you, Dan, and the team, and I'm willing to move my family to St. Louis to try this new market because that's an opportunity. And if you make them make that move and they shift their whole family, the kids go to different schools, and then after 8 months you say, hey, this didn't work out, we're shutting down the St. Louis office, you feel bad too as a person.
1,000%. Yeah. I mean, that's what you're always, especially when you're, even those moves in general, you're always, if they have kids, you're very like, listen, this is a gamble. It's bad. And most thing, knock on wood, almost every time now it's worked out, with the exception of the first Atlanta managing partner that we then, after he moved out, we took a partner that went and ran our Jackson, Mississippi office, made that somewhat successful. We then moved him to Atlanta, and then it got back to rolling the way it was supposed to roll. We got a great operator in Mississippi. And so we were able to, it's like the G League, the development league. You learn it.
Yeah, development league. Yeah,
you're the second in command in Orlando, and then eventually you're going to be the first in command in Tampa. That's how Tampa was built that way. Jacksonville was built that way. And then eventually too, I mean, obviously, if you get a great person internally in Orlando, we have a great managing partner there, Sean Shaughnessy, who's been at the helm for a while now. He's young too, so hopefully he'll be there forever. But eventually, you probably will eventually recruit from within in Orlando whenever that time comes to pass the torch. You do it that way. But as you kind of do these new expansion markets, you definitely want to know. And we do a ton of due diligence even before putting marketing into it. What are the different laws regarding, if it's a med-mal, every med-mal state is different with caps or punitives or economics, non-economic caps. What's the rules on proposal for settlements or offers of judgments in some markets? Is it, comparative, contributory, pure comparative, all that sorts of stuff. We're in North Carolina marketing, which is a pure contrib state. So premise cases, slip and cases are, very, very hard. So when we're looking at why are conversion rates great in Florida on these slip and fall cases and terrible in North Carolina, it's because that threshold's so much harder that even if 1% on the client, their shoes untied, but the manhole cover, they're out, type. So learning those different intricacies and then saying, for a while we didn't want to go to North Carolina because they didn't think it would be a successful market. And now we're there. It's like, the auto industry, the auto cases are just as good because the liability, if you rear end someone, you rear end someone. There's no way around it. Obviously, if it's
it's just that maybe you'll invest less. In marketing, you make those decisions.
You learn it. Yeah, you learn it. Maybe you don't go heavy with boots on the ground. Maybe you as cases come in, you still refer the majority of it out. You keep some cases. You kind of just make those decisions as you go, and then sometimes you have an attorney that will actually reach out to you and be like, hey, FYI, my wife's family's from Charlotte. I'm planning on, either leaving the firm in 2 years, but if you guys would be open to it, I would love to work there and do that. Do you have cases? You look into it. We've had people that have gone to some kind of offshoot places in Kentucky where we didn't really have offices there, but we're like, what, if you're going to be there, we know you're a good lawyer. We know that we can kind of cast our net in that area too, like in Bowling Green. Why not? Let's put you in there. And all of a sudden you get an offer that's churning out 7 figures a year. So, it definitely, works.
Yeah. So, we talked about transparency, patience in this, in these different markets. And it goes back to what you were talking about earlier in the beginning about grow or die. Right. And that goes for not just the business in growing and expanding and trying to hit that next level, but it seems like that permeates through to the attorneys as well. As you were talking about adopting technology, if you don't grow as a lawyer or as a team member or as a partner in a new market, hey, you got to grow, because everything we want. I always say this to my team, both at Esquire Tech and at my old firm, as I always say, like, everything you want is outside of your comfort zone. Yeah. Right. That's where your goals are, because your goals shouldn't be in your comfort zone. That's a problem. I mean, your goals aren't big enough. So you have to be willing to learn that new thing, whether it's a new technology, whether it's a new system, whether it's, new employees, new area, whatever it may be. You have to be willing to kind of get to that next level. And it feels like that grow or die mentality just permeates throughout the firm at all levels.
For sure. Yeah. When kind of we've transitioned kind of the even classifications of attorneys and the way it works. Before, when I first started, you were pretty much a pot attorney, meaning you worked pre-suit, you worked litigation, You worked slip and fall cases, auto cases, dog bite cases. If it was personal injury, it was coming into your pod. You were doing litigation. You're working it all. And then kind of we separated out. So we had people that just did premise liability and those types of cases, and then just did auto. And as we've kind of kept going, now we have, when you first start, you might just be doing pre-suit auto. And then at a certain step, you might get promoted. You might then start doing the litigation on a small caseload basis. And then you might amp up to larger caseload basis. And so we kind of now have steps where you can kind of keep growing within the roles, honing your skills. And then you kind of see where you're at comparatively to people that are around your same age or start around the same time, where you might be a litigation attorney for 3-4 years. And someone might be a litigation attorney for 1 year because they came in and crushed and got 4 verdicts. And right. It's like now they're going to, and then now what it is you have an attorney that oversees 4 litigation attorneys, and they have their own caseload as well, but then they're also incentivized to help everybody else raise up. And then they kind of, that org, and then there's someone that oversees all of that program. So there's constantly ways to keep working up and keep growing within the company. And it's, it's not linear either. You might go from a litigation attorney and really just
right.
bust it, and all of a sudden it's like, hey, you want to go run Chicago for us? And you're like, wait, what's going on right now? So it's, if we identify talent and you're out there grinding and hustling, like I said, it's a meritocracy where you can be, skyrocketing up, and you might have someone that's just is great at what they do, and they don't want to move up. They're like, listen, I love being a litigation. We've had it happen plenty of times. Hey, we want you to be a summit leader. And they're like, honestly, I don't want the leadership position. I love what I do. Let me just work in these 80 cases. And all right, and that's their mentality, and they're a B+ attorney, and that's where they're going to be. You can lock them in and steady Eddie and forget about it, and know those cases are handled.
And it's got to be the right fit for everybody, right? It's got to be the right fit for the firm, and it's got to be the right fit for the individual, the employee, because if it's not a right fit for them and their lifestyle and how it fits into their larger picture of their own life, then it's not going to work. They're just going to fail at that new position, even though it may be a promotion, even though it may be more money. It's just, if it's not for them, it's not for them.
Exactly. And even like practice area, for instance, someone might be, right now in Florida, I'm sure people have seen with all this tort reform stuff. We have, personal injury protection. Some states have it, some states don't, but PIP, where there's 10,000 of medical coverage, but there's a huge industry of legal fees that are made off of denied PIP coverages.
Right.
And DeSantis, with one pen stroke, has pretty much eliminated that entire industry for thousands of attorneys, where now you have all these attorneys that were doing PIP litigation, and they still have a tail of like 5 years before it'll eventually be kind of statute of limitations out. But then it's like, hey, PIP's over. Do you want to go be a personal injury attorney? We have to fit. And they're kind of like, what are you talking about? I don't want to be, client facing. I like working with medical providers back end on billing issues. I don't want to be out there litigating on behalf of injuries. And just because that's not their personality, they're more introverted. They're not, when you're doing those type of trials, you're not really doing human damages. You're not talking about the emotion. Right. You're talking about, this provider was skimped $100, therefore statutorily they're paid that back, and you got to pay my hourly fees to get them that money back, so you can scale up that way. So it's just a whole different. But we had a PIP department, so we're in that process now of figuring out what to do with it. Some of our offices have closed, like Jacksonville in South Florida, Orlando and Tampa are still. They want to wait the 5 years out and then make their decisions there. So we're still, all those things are still actively going on. You're still kind of seeing how it's all going to work out.
Yeah, let's talk about that tort reform for a second. I mean, obviously that was, pretty what's the word I'm looking for? Draconian. Yeah. It was a pretty big swing from where Florida was. Now look, some of the things we were talking before we started recording, some of the things just got in line with the rest of the country. Like a 4-year statute became a 2-year statute. That became just kind of where it is and for a firm like yours that has offices everywhere, you're already kind of used to that. So not the biggest change, but from what I read, being on the outside of the Florida market, some of the things were pretty drastic, like the limitations on the medical bills.
Exactly. Yeah. So I mean, and from what the initial bill was to what actually got passed was obviously, a lot less of what it could have been. Originally they were trying to mandate the only futures you could present would be Medicare rates and, things like that, where you couldn't, if you, and even with LOPs, they kind of did, it's more in the line with some of your, with the Massachusetts type of system. Now, see, that was our advantage with it, is we were able to look at, all right, well, LLPs are gone. Well, we have markets in Massachusetts that deal with that same exact type of law there. All right. Well,
could you explain an LLP? What's an LLP?
Oh, so LLP is a letter of protection. So, you can treat in Florida, like I said, we have the PIP. So if your PIP runs out and you don't have health insurance, you can still go to a medical provider. They treat you under a letter of protection, meaning they collect the money once the case is resolved. Exactly. It's a lien.
Like a lien.
It's a lien. Exactly. It's a lien, so to speak, but just a different kind of paper in the way they go about doing it. And Florida pretty much said, well, if the patient hasn't come out of pocket and they actually don't owe that money, then you can't present that type of paper to a jury to say they owe it. They don't really owe it. So it's just kind of, you have to, medically speaking, if they're not going through insurance, there's just different ways to go about it. Whether you have a company come in that prepays the loan out, like, there's tons of companies that are doing that now because every state's different. So we're able to at least look at, with we went from a system before of, if you were 99% at fault, but 1% not at fault, you could still recover for that 1%, where now they kind of brought us more in line with the rest of the country, where if you're 51% at fault, you can't recover. If you're 49% you can recover up that 51. So it's just more that system. Whereas in North Carolina, we talked about earlier, if you're 1% not at fault, you're still barred from everything. So we're able to look at, all right, where does this now align more with, all right, this is just like these 10 states we're in. So let's get these processes we do in those states down. I know the statute was, wasn't that big of a hit because we were used to it, but the big hit was that the date the statute changed was the date he signed the bill. So for all these cases we had out there that were older than 2 years, but say it's a 3-year-old case, but we haven't filed the lawsuit yet because we thought, hey, we have another year to do it. Let's see if we can get it done in pre-suit for a lower rate for the client at 33 instead of the 40% litigation.
Right.
Because we think it's going to get done before it goes to litigation. Well, now it's like, well, no, we got to get, we had thousands and thousands of lawsuits. We had to get filed within a 2-week frame to preserve all these clients' rights. Because if that bill got signed, if all of a sudden you had a case that was outside that statute,
it was out.
That case is banned, and now we got our legal malpractice claims coming our way as well. Because like you guys were sleeping on your hands, you knew it was coming. Why was I in litigation 2 years ago? Why was I in 3 years ago? Well, you're allowed to, but then it wasn't. So, and then of course when we filed, I forget the exact numbers, but people start writing articles on it. Morgan files 20.
The article I read was like 25 or 27,000 cases, something like that.
Well, exactly. So then they're mad. They're like, well, they filed all these lawsuits. Like, yeah, we did, because if we didn't, all those claims would have been extinguished. And now the insurance company's like, well, that's not fair. They should still be extinguished anyway. It's like, what are you talking about? It's like,
this is your law.
We played by your rules that you implemented, and now you're complaining because we were smart enough to get all the cases in to preserve our clients' rights. And now they want extensions, saying, well, we should get discovery extensions. There's no way our companies can answer these lawsuits in time. It's like,
and what did they expect? What did they expect? Right. That's the question. Is like, what did you expect me to do, Mr. or Mrs. Insurance Company? Like, just let my clients' claims be extinguished? I mean, that'd be insane.
They obviously didn't expect that. We had the army that we had. They were hoping, I guess, that is what would happen. And then they would have been able to write off, 25,000 claims and say, hey, good news, Allstate got Mr. Buffett. We just lost billions of exposure because Mr. DeSantis signed the bill we need him to sign. Instead of just saying, hey, I got bad news, Morgan was able to preserve all those claims still. And they're probably like, how? It's like, we're moving different.
And they probably, look, they've got their lawyers too. Like, they probably should have anticipated, at least you would hope that they anticipated. And maybe the messaging to the litigation attorneys or to the adjusters from the higher ups at State Farm or whatever was that, oh, this is Morgan and Morgan being Morgan and Morgan. But I'm sure that the higher ups there probably looked at the chessboard and realized, well, if I was Morgan and Morgan, if I was these attorneys, what would I do? Because they would all do the same thing. You would have to file to protect your client's claim.
Yeah, exactly. That's what if we didn't, they're saying, this is just, it's another reason we needed tort reforms for a move like this. It's like, no, if the law is the law and the law before it, you can recover for all these PIP claims, so to speak. And that's what we're doing now. We're doing that. We have 5 years. We're scraping everything right now. We're going through the fine tooth comb because it's gonna be the last time you make money on that type of litigation. So let's see what's left there. And now they're getting well, they're presenting claims for 4 years ago. It's like, well, yeah, we have 5 years to do it, so we're going to present,
Yeah.
so it's always, even, they wanted to do the tort reform because the rates in Florida are too high. They want to bring the rates down, bills in session, signed. Guess what? Rates are not going down. Rates are going
No, they're not going down. And we all know that. My brother-in-law is a doctor, and I always tease him because he always talks about medical malpractice, and he's always right. Yeah. And I always say, like, look, they got you guys to pass in California. They got you guys to pass this bill in 1975 or whatever, MICRA, to cap medical malpractice. And you've been a doctor since he's been a doctor since like 1996 or something. It's like, have you ever once seen your rates go down? No, never. They've all gone up. And what the insurance companies then come out and say is, well, they would have gone up more. It's like, no.
Exactly. Yeah, you're lucky. Yeah, of course it went up. Inflation's going. Yeah, I just got my house reinsured here, and I got the new rate. I'm like, what? How is it this much more when all this stuff was just done to bring it down? Like, oh, sorry, but now we don't have to worry about paying. That's in Florida too, like first party roof claims. Those are all pretty much gone now. So before, if a hurricane came through and blew your roof off, and the insurance company said no, we're not paying it. Well, once you got your roof back, the insurance company would then pay the attorney's fees on that litigation. Now the way it works, if your roof blows off, it's a contingency base. So if you have make math easy because we're lawyers, you have $100,000 roof. Well, guess what? If the lawyer's coming in making 30% on it, well, you still got to come up with $30,000 to get your full roof.
Right.
What's going to happen is, one, clients aren't going to want to pay that, and two, attorneys aren't going to want to get into business with, maybe I get paid, maybe I don't, doing kind of charity work or one-off work or however it's going to work. So, I mean, that we'll see.
Well, I'll tell you what happens there, because my old firm, we used to handle some of these claims out in California, and we don't have an attorney fee statute in California, right? So we would take a contingency fee, and I'd sit down with the clients in intake, and I just tell them, look, I'm going to be straight up with you. There's at this point when the insurance company has already denied your claim or is already trying to underpay you without us getting involved, there just isn't a situation where you're going to get 100%.
Exactly. Yeah.
That just situation doesn't exist. And it really sucks. And I hate to be the one to deliver that news to you, but your choices are either try to get as much as you can from your insurance company on your own, which go for it. I have no problem with you doing that. Hire us, which of course we have to get paid for our work. So we're going to take a fee.
Yeah.
And the only way the insurance company pays 100% is if we go all the way to trial, which is going to take a year and a half from now, and we get the jury to give us what we want. You don't have a problem doing that. But in the meantime, you got to get your roof fixed.
Exactly.
You got to get your kitchen. What are you going to do for a year? So, you're kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place, and the insurance companies have that leverage. And then I just left it in the client's court to decide how they wanted to handle it.
Exactly. And that's California too, where those probably claims are there. But in Florida, you got hurricanes coming through, blowing off left and right, where, they're going to be able to just, now it's scale say denied, they'll say that's not a hurricane, that's wind. Or, we're in Sanibel where all the flooding in houses were destroyed over there. The insurance company from that last hurricane that came through, the insurance companies have already come through and denied majority of the claims, saying that's not hurricane, that's storm surge. They didn't have storm surge coverage. Therefore, these houses are all denied. It's like, well, the storms, but for the hurricane, there is a storm surge. Like, oh, I'm sorry, these are all storm surge claims. Or if that's storm surge protection, they'd probably say, oh, those are all hurricane claims. Those aren't so they would just kind of do one of those.
Totally. All right, a couple more questions. I want to be respectful of your time, so I really appreciate it, Dan, and I can't tell you how much I've appreciated our conversation. One thing I'm gonna shift gears. I'm gonna get a little personal here with you, Dan. Is I'm sure you felt this way, and so I want you to be able to address this. I'm sure you feel like in the firm, people look at you and they go, "Oh, well, Dan had it easy because it's his dad's firm, and he never really had to work, and he kind of had it." What do you say to that?
Well, I mean, there's definitely, obviously, you're going to get the nepotism stuff really wherever you're at. Luckily, a lot of the OGs that have been around have been able to see me there when I was a runner, when I was an investigator, and they kind of, they've seen me come up through it. So they have seen me pay my dues. But obviously, you'll get a newer attorney or something that probably looks at you a little differently, or, oh, he's doing this, or, he's only on this podcast because his last name's Morgan. I'm doing better than he is in the courtroom right now.
Nobody's jealous about you being on the podcast.
The way my dad did with all of us is when I got my law degree, it took me a little while to get my bar license. I had a couple college issues, so misdemeanors got to get cleared up from my bar days
Sure.
to get to the other bar. Once we got those cleared up,
Yeah.
once we got those cleared up, but I started with no assistant, no paralegal. It's like every day or every week for the first or every week for the first 2 months, I got one case a week. So case comes in, here it is, call the client, and kind of learning it that way, get them to a medical provider, get the insurance coverages out, get the file set up, this, that. All right, now the next one's coming. And obviously you kind of scale. And then once I got to like 25 or 30, then I got a paralegal who was kind of a jack of all trades. She's my case manager paralegal. And I had her till I was at 150 cases. Yeah. And then, I got case managers from there where all of a sudden I was up. So I was, we came through, we learned it that way. But then really it was, because I knew that I was going to be out there. I knew how to get in the courtroom. So, that's really how you get respect around a law firm. You go out there, you get results, you get fees, but verdicts are really where the warriors are established. The Keith Mitnicks is like the Rick Blocks, the Brian McLean's. Those are the kind of the guys we look at our firm and you had this grow mentality. Like that's the ultimate kind of end goal where attorneys are trying to get, where they're just senior trial attorneys. They get cases sent to them. I know you're familiar with like a Brian Panish, those are the guys that they get the case in, they don't really worry about what's going, they get, and they just go in the courtroom and get the $10 million verdicts and they're the heroes.
That's right.
But that's kind of where you're working towards. So I knew I had, if I was going to be successful in this law firm and get respect in this law firm, I had to get in the courtroom. So that was kind of the mission going out. It obviously takes a while, especially, California, it takes forever, New York and Orlando, these markets, you can get a court date in Des Moines, Iowa in probably 3 months from now. But if you want to get one in Orlando, it's going to take you about 2 years. Because, that's also another thing we look at markets. How quick is it going to get to a courtroom? But I knew that was kind of the way I was going to get it. So I just started getting verdicts really. I've had probably 6 or 7 seven-figure verdicts.
Oh, wow.
Last year, I think I tried 9 cases and was successful on about 7 of them. Only got zipped on one, which we're appealing because it was such a bullshit. It was the defense attorney said that my client was certain to award $30,000 and the jury still said 0. So, that's
crazy. Yeah.
Story for another day. But so it was really just get in there and doing that and getting the reputation of he's going to try cases. Now, truthfully speaking too, like when we set lawyers into courtrooms my first time, my brother Matt was next to me. He did he picked the jury.
Of course.
He did closing. Probably.
But that's the way you learn.
Exactly. Like 2 or 3. I know at least, me and Keith got one last year for like 2.8 million. Obviously, Keith Mitnick's doing closing arguments. He's doing the ask, but I'm working the case up. I'm getting into the court. And then Keith comes in or Rick Block comes in or whoever comes in and you're learning like crazy. I've learned more in trials, 1 week trial with Keith Mitnick than I probably learned in a semester advocacy class, back at Stetson, such a great law school. I don't want to shit on them, but you just
no. That's just the reality. Practical knowledge is so different.
Yeah, doing a cross examination of a defense doctor, and then being able to go to lunch with Keith and have him give you notes on here's what you did bad, here's what you did good. Next time, hammer him on this, and then the next time comes around, and all of a sudden, my first trial ever, I sweated through my suit, and now I'm pro hawking into Atlanta. I was up there last week, pro hawked in and doing defense doctors and opening statements and things like that. So it's definitely been fun. You get the reputation where now younger attorneys reach out to you. But that's kind of how you get your respect around more and more in his verdicts. My brother Matt did it. My brother Mike's still doing it. He leads our products department, Mass Torts. He just got that huge gas case out in California. He was leading that. He does a lot of jewel litigation. So a lot of the Morgans, obviously the nepotism card's out there, but we just try to let our results speak.
Of course.
Definitely see other firms out there and different people that might, I have seen a kind of a trend where some of these people out there that have kids that are, really good at law, that have actually taught their kids to work hard and they're out there doing it now. I've been Brian before, but both his daughters are, out there doing law, they're doing it successfully. Bob Hilliard has son Alex Hilliard who's crushing it down in Texas. So there are these second generations of lawyers out there that are doing really impressive stuff. But then there's also kids out there that aren't going to law school and they're hanging out in Mykonos and living that.
Yeah. Well, I think
I'm still friends with them. Hey, you got a vacation house in Mykonos.
Yeah, I'm jealous of them.
Exactly. I'm there. But it's good to do both. I mean, to work hard, play hard type mentality that my dad really instilled. That's, I've watched him growing up. He was work hard, play hard his whole life. He had even his, his side hustle jobs. Like I said, he had attractions. He had a sports agency. He was, launching banks and hotels. He just kept it interesting and fun and having fun with it. I won't go to HBO, but, he has this saying, if work is work, you're effed, pretty much. If you wake up every morning, you're like, I can't believe I have to go take a deposition of this doctor right now. This is the last thing I want to do. Opposed to like Keith wakes up, he's like, I get to take a deposition of a doctor this afternoon. Let's fucking go. You know what I mean? There's their mentality. Or when you're waking up for court and you're like, I just don't. Instead, like if you're not sleeping because you're so excited to go to court, so people are just wired different like that. So.
No, I 100% agree with you. And I think also what people don't realize, and, my son's 12, so he's getting to the point where he's starting to think about what he wants to be when he grows up and things like that. And a couple months ago, he said, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I was super excited. I'm like, heck yeah, because what I've always told my kids is what you just said is what I want for you is that when your feet hit the floor on Monday morning, you're pumped and you're looking forward to the things you're going to get to do that day. That to me is a successful life. That's where you want to be. Whether you make less money or more money is kind of irrelevant because you're gonna, as long as you can put a roof over your head and take care of your family. But if you get to enjoy it, you're gonna do it for 30 plus years. You got to really enjoy it. So I took him down to the courthouse because Rahul was trying a case in San Diego, which is my hometown. I was like, come watch Rahul in trial. And I think what people miss when they talk about that, nepotism card is, hey, you don't understand that ever since you were a kid, there was talk of the law and discussion of business. Exactly. And there has been training and experience from day one because, I know it's true in my household, so I got to imagine it's true in John Morgan's household, is that's what you talk about at the dinner table.
Exactly. That's what it was. I remember being 8, 9 years old at the dinner table, and it was talking about, these two lawyers are leaving because we're going to Atlanta. We're going to have to go get this money to get marketing since they're not going to be putting their portion anymore. How are we raising this? How are we doing that? Get these. You're learning business lessons. You're learning so much osmosis of even the sayings I'm saying now, like the bullets before bombs, grow or die. Those are all just dinner conversations and life lessons that have been ingrained over the years. And, like I said, Morgan was launched in 88. I was born in 89. He was the first lawyer on TV in 1990. So my whole life, you just see your pops on TV, talking about helping the injured. And obviously, too, with our family story, my Uncle Tim was paralyzed, which, at Disney accident. That was my dad's calling to get him involved. So you're just around and you're living it and you're seeing the day-to-day. So, of course, in full candor, though, I did not want to be doing this when I was back in college. I was close with a UF basketball team. I had a bunch of buddies. I was going to be a sports agent. I was interning. I worked for Mark Cuban for a summer. I worked for a sports agent for one summer. And I was like, I'm going in this realm of my life. It's what I'm doing. And in my dad's credit, he's like, that's fine. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. He's like, but before you do that, you need to go get your law degree first. You need to have the fallback plan if that doesn't work out. And not only that, but you need to have that because that's going to get you more respect. If you actually want to be a sports agent, if you're going to go to a player and say, I'm a lawyer, that's going to set you apart from the next guy that's not. I started off when I first got out, I had opportunities to go work for some of these agents. I decided I was going to work for Morgan & Morgan and kind of bootstrap an agency, which I did for 5-6 years. I kind of put that to the side now. It was fun doing it, but he let me at least, that was the dream I wanted to do. He let me kind of lead that path and make me my own decision where it turned out I was more excited to wake up and go to a courtroom than to wake up and go to the NBA tournament and, sell myself to a kid that's, thinks he's God's gift to the earth.
Right. Yeah. That's a whole different ego to deal with. Yeah. That brings me to another question, just kind of as a father myself. It seems like obviously you and your dad are close. The whole family's close. And obviously as your dad was building the business throughout your childhood, I'm sure he was gone a lot, traveled a lot, was, kind of constantly working. How did you see in the household the balance between trying to maintain a close family bond while also trying to build a legendary business?
Yeah, looking back on it, there was never kind of too many memories of like, where's dad? What's going on? He's not here. He was always good to, at least be around, most of the week. He might be gone Wednesday, Thursday, or something along those lines. He might be flying to New York for a meeting. A lot of times he'd fly up to Atlanta, fly back that night to Atlanta. He was big on the dinner table, at least being there. My mom pretty much cooked every night or he grilled every night. So at least, most of the memories, I played, like I said, I played Pop Warner football. My brothers played baseball and stuff. I mean, I would say if not every Saturday, 95% of those Saturdays, he was at those games. We had a beach condo growing up. Most of the weekends were if we're not playing sports, the family was over there. And then, yeah, I mean, he'd have, late nights in Orlando, things like that. Or he'd go to New York and generate business. Or, he launched a law firm with Johnny Cochran. He was a partner in that firm back when he was a pallbearer in Johnny's funeral. So, when all that stuff was going on, I was probably in third, fourth, fifth grade. But, he was very big on the kids being there. So he's having dinner. Johnny's coming to Orlando for dinner. Johnny's having dinner at our dinner table, meet our kid. Let's talk. Yeah. They're all, so you're just around it. You're living it. And then it's, hey, we're launching the DC office. Do you guys want to go up for it? And things like that. So we're always kind of around it. The sports agency, I said, if he was going to a baseball game to watch his players, he was bringing us with him. So it really wasn't too much. I mean, obviously it's somewhat easier now with Zooms and things like that. But, back in the day, if he was launching an office, he had to be there. So I'm sure there were some stretches that he was gone or not there as much. But, as far as my working memory, he was always a pretty central figure.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So, Dan, thank you so much. I got one final question for you, and I'll let you go. We're a little bit over time, so I'm sorry for keeping you.
You're all good, man.
One question I ask every guest, because I've heard just so much insightful stuff from it, and I want to ask you too is, you've obviously been very successful in doing what you do. You've seen the business grow. You've been a part of that growth, decision maker. If you could go back and talk to 21-year-old Dan Morgan, what would you tell him?
Tell him slow down with the shots. Probably start there. No, I mean, really, I've been watching a lot of these NBA playoffs lately. I've been watching, Joel Embiid. He's actually played high school ball here, and he won the MVP. But his whole slogan, the Sixers' whole slogan is, trust the process. I'd probably lean into that slogan of trust the process, because back you couldn't tell 21-year-old Dan Morgan much of anything. If you were telling me, probably was going one ear out the other. Like I said, my dad says I was in law school under duress. It was, all right, I'm going to law school. I'm going to go out to Houston because my buddy's in the Rockets. He's like, no, you're not. I'm like, all right, I'm going to go to Miami then. He's like, no, you're not. He's like, you're going over to St. Pete, to Retirementsville, USA, and working in our law office there. And when those times he was saying that, I was kicking and screaming, and I was telling my mom, I'm not going to be this. I'm not going to be that. It's just really, I would say, trust the process. I know you don't think this is the path, or you don't think this is what you want to do. But in the end, this is where you are going to want to be. It's where you're going to have the most fun. I'm dealing stuff. Like I said, I wanted to be around sports. I wanted to be around that world. Well, fast forward now, we're the official law firm of the Yankees and the Phillies. I have a call later today with the Vegas Knights. We're the official law firm of the UFC. We have, NASCAR meetings. We have a NASCAR truck now, so all these things I wanted to be a part of, that I thought my only path to get there was via these different avenues. It's like, no, all this stuff is symbiotic with law firms, with marketing, with this and that. You're going to have fun. I wanted to be a deal maker. And, if I wasn't going to be a sports agent, I wanted to be in real estate development. Well, guess what? We buy law offices, we're buying investment properties, things like that. So everything a part of it that I wanted to do, I am doing. So it's been a blessing. So I would probably just go back to, and I would call him Demo Swag, because that's what he was going back by. I'd say Demo Swag, trust the process.
I love that. That's a great place for us to wrap up. Thank you so much, Dan, for coming on here and being so open and forthright with us. And thank you all for listening or watching. We'll see you on the next episode of Bootstrap Solo. And remember, just because guys like Dan Morgan make it look easy and effortless doesn't mean that it is. One ask I have for all you listeners: if you enjoyed the pod, please share it where you share stuff, LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok. We don't have ads on here or anything like that. And so the only way we can grow is if you share it. And Dan, please tell everybody where they can reach out to you if they have questions about trial, or they have questions about marketing, and they want to kind of reach out to you. How do they get a hold of you?
For sure, yeah. So now, like I said, I'm more involved in the referrals, so both inbound and outbound referrals. So we send cases to every good law firm in the country. If you're a good law firm, definitely reach out to me. My email is easy. It's dmorgan@forthepeople.com, FORTHEPOLPLE.com, dmorgan@forthepeople.com. And then my Instagram also, if you want to DM me there, it's pretty easy. It's @DanMorganESQ. And I'm pretty,
got it.
pretty quick back on responses. So yeah, we're looking for firms to both send cases to, receive cases from. So definitely reach out and connect. I'd definitely love to get you in our network.
Awesome, and we'll put those tags in the show notes, so you can see them there as well. I gotta say, Dan, I'm a little disappointed that it's not at Demo Swag.
It was at once upon a time. It was at Demo Swag, and I think one of my buddies finally told me, he's like, you gotta, it's not very professional. I was like, no, Demo Swag ESQ. Like, no, I think you gotta get it. But if you actually Google Demo Swag, you'll see one of my one and only rap song that's out there. It got a couple thousand.
Oh, that's awesome.
Enjoy that as well. Listen,
maybe we'll put that in the show notes as well.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dan. This was truly a pleasure. I really enjoyed it. And thank you all for listening. And we'll see you next time on Bootstrap Solo.